This is the Legacy Times, bringing you information on history, politics, economics, finance, and international policy. This video will be focused on one of the darkest days in American history, September 11th, 2001. Specifically, I will be focusing on one event during the 9/11 attacks that is rarely acknowledged by the general public or media, the story of United Airlines Flight 93. I will provide a detailed timeline of the events of United Flight 93, and if you enjoy this video, please click the like button and subscribe. Now, let's get started. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, millions of Americans living on the eastern seaboard wake up to a cloudless, bright blue September sky, getting ready to begin their day. At 6:48 a.m., 4 young Arab men, clean-shaven and dressed in business clothes, check out of their Marriott and Days Inn airport hotel rooms and make their way to Newark International Airport. From 7:03 a.m. to 7:24 a.m., Ziad Jarrah, Ahmed al-Ghaznawi, Ahmed al-Anami, and Saeed al-Ghamdi arrive at Newark International Airport. Ahmed al-Anami checks in 2 bags at the United Airlines counter, and Ahmed al-Ghaznawi checks in 1 bag. Al-Ghaznawi is the only hijacker whose luggage is selected for extra screening for explosives by Newark Airport security. As a precaution, his bag is held off the plane until he boards. All 4 men pass through Newark Airport security without incident, carrying razor blades, knives, and materials to construct a makeshift bomb. Compared to the 3 other aircrafts that will be hijacked, United Flight 93 has a 4-man crew as opposed to 5 men. The 4 hijackers are between the ages of 20 to 26 years old and legally in the United States. Ahmed al-Anami, Saeed al-Ghamdi, and Ahmed al-Ghaznawi are citizens of Saudi Arabia, and Ziad Jarrah is a citizen of Lebanon. The 9/11 Commission report speculates that Al-Qaeda is missing a 5th member on Flight 93. Mohammed al-Qahtani or Zakaria Moussaoui were the intended 5th hijackers for United Flight 93. Mohammed al-Qahtani was denied entrance into the United States at Orlando International Airport 1 month earlier by a suspicious immigration official. Al-Qahtani would be arrested by American forces at the Battle of Tora Bora in December of 2001 and spend 20 years in American custody at Guantanamo Bay before being sent back to a mental health facility in Saudi Arabia in March of 2022. Zakaria Moussaoui, a French national, is arrested in Eagan, Minnesota weeks before September 11th by arousing suspicion when taking flight courses. Moussaoui stated that he only wanted to learn to fly an airplane and not how to land or take off. Moussaoui would be convicted and found guilty of being a member of Al-Qaeda and conspiring to kill Americans as part of the 9/11 attacks. As of 2006, Moussaoui is serving a life sentence at ADX Supermax Prison in Florence, Colorado, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Due to being 1 man short, it is critical for Al-Qaeda that Ziad Jarrah passed through airport security without incident. Of the 4 hijackers, Ziad Jarrah is the only one who knows how to fly an aircraft and speaks English fluently. Born in Beirut, Lebanon to a wealthy, secular, liberal family, Jarrah went to Catholic school his entire life and was known to frequent discos with friends, drink alcohol, drive his girlfriends around in his father's Mercedes, and was considered outgoing and friendly by his peers in both Lebanon and America. Compared to the other hijackers, Ziad Jarrah made friends in America and kept in contact with his family. He was engaged to be married to a beautiful Turkish dental student by the name of Aysel Senguin. On the morning of September 11th, Jarrah calls his fiancée Aysel in Germany one last time to tell her he loves her. Weeks later, the FBI would intercept and seize a letter that Ziad Jarrah sent Aysel before September 11th, which U.S. counterterrorism officials believe was a suicide letter and justification for his actions. Aside from his call to his fiancée Aysel, Ziad Jarrah makes several calls on the morning of September 11th. He places 5 calls to his home country of Lebanon, 1 call to France, and 1 final call to Al-Qaeda terrorist Marwan al-Shehi, the pilot hijacker of United Airlines Flight 175, which will hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. It is unknown what both men discussed during the call, but counterterrorism officials believe that both men were saying goodbye and/or the assault on America is on. At 7:30 a.m., the passengers of United Flight 93 would begin to board their flight. At 7:39 a.m., Ahmed al-Haznawi and Saeed al-Ghamdi board the aircraft and sit in 6B and 3D respectively. At 7:40 a.m., Ahmed al-Anami would board the flight and he would sit in first class in seat 3C. At 7:48 a.m., Ziad Jarrah would be the last of the 4 hijackers to board the plane. He sits in seat 1B. Jarrah will sit right next to the cockpit door, which will make it easy for him to slip into the cockpit once the hijacking starts. At least one of the hijackers is carrying a document entitled The Last Night, an instruction sheet for the hijackers to steel themselves and brace for martyrdom. Embrace the will to die and renew allegiance. Shave the extra body hair and wear cologne. Pray, familiarize yourself with the plan well from every aspect, and anticipate the reaction and resistance from the enemy, reads the first passage. These instructions are most likely followed in silence because Al-Qaeda instructs the hijackers to blend in and avoid raising suspicion while they wait to depart. At least 10 of the passengers and crew on Flight 93 had planned to take later or earlier flights or found themselves on Flight 93 due to schedule changes. One of these passengers, passenger Lauren Grancolis, calls her husband in San Rafael, California, and leaves a voicemail saying she will arrive home an hour earlier than expected. She had been scheduled for United Airlines Flight 91, but her car service arrived at the airport early, allowing her to take Flight 93 instead. United Airlines Flight 93 was scheduled to take off at 8 a.m. Eastern Time from gate A17 en route to San Francisco, California at Newark International Airport. However, due to being one of New York City's 3 major airports, heavy air traffic was very common and United Flight 93 was delayed 42 minutes. Unknowingly, this 42-minute delay would be crucial for the passengers of Flight 93 and alter history. At 8:42 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 takes off after a 42-minute delay. Some passengers on board Flight 93 have a view of Manhattan's skyline due to Newark being across the Hudson River from Lower Manhattan. The passengers would have seen the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in its final moments before destruction. 4 minutes after Flight 93 takes off from Newark International Airport, American Airlines Flight 11, under the control of 5 Al-Qaeda terrorists, would crash into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. United Airlines Flight 93 carried a total of 37 passengers, including the 4 hijackers and a crew of 7. Captain Jason Dahl and First Officer Leroy Homer led the crew of United Flight 93. This 5-year-old Boeing 757 jet could carry up to 182 passengers, but was flying at only 22% of its maximum capacity. Al-Qaeda purposely chose a day with lower passenger volume to ensure less interference and resistance from the passengers and crew. At 9:24 a.m., 42 minutes into the flight, United Airlines dispatcher Ed Bollinger sends a text message to Captain Jason Dahl to beware of any cockpit intrusions. 2 aircraft hit World Trade Center. At 9:26 a.m., Captain Jason Dahl reads the message from dispatcher Ed Bollinger. Confused, Captain Dahl writes back, "Ed, confirm latest message, please. Jason." This will be the final communication the United Airlines dispatch team will receive from either Captain Jason Dahl or First Officer Leroy Homer. At 9:28 a.m., flying over eastern Ohio, the 4 Al-Qaeda terrorists aboard United Flight 93 make their move. The hijackers tie red bandanas around their heads and fatally stab a passenger and begin moving all the passengers and flight crew to the back of the aircraft. Out of the 6 passengers seated in first class on Flight 93, only one did not make a phone call to his family after the plane was hijacked. Being seated in seat 5B, passenger Mickey Rottenberg is sitting right in front of Ahmed al-Haznawi, who murdered Mickey Rottenberg in front of everyone when the assault began. The cockpit of United Flight 93 is breached, and a struggle can be heard by Cleveland Air Traffic Control. Due to the warning from the United Airlines dispatcher 4 minutes earlier, it is very likely that Captain Dahl and First Officer Homer keyed the radio transmission so the struggle and mayday call could be heard by air traffic control, not just as a cry for help, but as a warning to other airplanes. When the terrorists stormed the cockpit of United Flight 93, it loses 685 feet of altitude almost immediately before pilot hijacker Ziad Jarrah stabilizes the aircraft. It is unknown which of the hijackers stormed the cockpit door, but audio forensic technology not available in 2001 could give us a major clue. Originally, the 9/11 Commission report determined that all 4 hijackers rushed the cockpit simultaneously, but audio forensics determined that 4 people in total were present in the cockpit during the hijacking. The 2 terrorists believed to have fatally stabbed Captain Jason Dahl and First Officer Leroy Homer are Saeed Al-Ghamdi and Ahmed Al-Anami due to their seating proximity in seats 3D and 3C, and both men are trained by Al-Qaeda in unarmed combat. At 9:30 a.m., passenger Tom Burnett, who was originally in seat 4B in first class, calls his wife Dina to tell her that he's on United Flight 93 and his plane has been hijacked. Burnett mentions that one of the other passengers, believed to be Mickey Rottenberg, was stabbed. He tried to help Rottenberg, but there was too much blood and he did not have a pulse. At 9:32 a.m., with Ziad Jarrah and his 3 lieutenants now in full control of United Flight 93, Jarrah sends out a chilling threat. Due to his lack of piloting experience and knowledge, Jarrah's message is not transmitted to the passengers on board, but to air traffic control agents on the ground. Ziad Jarrah turns Flight 93 180 degrees over eastern Ohio towards Washington, D.C. At 9:35 a.m., flight attendant Sandy Bradshaw dials the United Airlines maintenance facility in San Francisco from the airphone in row 33 to report the hijacking. The manager who takes over the call describes her as shockingly calm. Flight attendant Bradshaw says that the hijackers are in the first class cabin and the cockpit and have announced that they have a bomb. She says they have knives and have killed a flight attendant believed to be flight attendant Debbie Welsh. At 9:37 a.m. in seat 25E, passenger Mark Bingham calls his mom, who was a former United Airlines flight attendant, to tell her that his flight has been hijacked and the 3 hijackers have a bomb. Another passenger, Jeremy Glick, calls his wife Liz from the airphone in row 27. He speaks to his mother-in-law initially before speaking to his wife in a call which lasts 25 and a half minutes. Glick tells his family that the plane has been hijacked by 3 Iranian-looking men with dark skin and bandanas. Glick also mentions that one of the men says he has a bomb in a red box and both men are armed with knives. He said that he and the other passengers are contemplating rushing the hijackers. The passengers are huddled in the back of the aircraft, voting on whether to storm the cockpit and retake control of the plane. Both passengers Jeremy Glick and Mark Bingham reported seeing only 3 hijackers with red bandanas armed with knives and a bomb. It is very likely that pilot hijacker Ziad Jarrah remained seated when the muscle hijackers began their assault on Flight 93 and entered the cockpit at the very last moment, unseen by the passengers. The cockpit recordings of United Flight 93 provide us clues of the 4 hijackers and their roles on Flight 93. Saeed Al-Ghamdi assisted Ziad Jarrah in the cockpit, and Ahmed Al-Anami and Ahmed Al-Haznawi were in charge of controlling the passengers and crew. It is unknown which hijacker had the makeshift bomb strapped to his waist, but it is likely it is Ahmed Al-Haznawi due to his original seat location. At takeoff, all passengers were sitting in the first 21 rows of the aircraft, but from 9:37 a.m. to the end of the flight, 12 different passengers and crew members make 36 total calls from rows 23 and back. Passenger Tom Burnett calls his wife Dina again to ask if she knows who is responsible for hijacking their airplane and what the intentions of the hijackers are. Dina reveals the grave reality of the situation to him and explains what happened at the World Trade Center earlier. Burnett passes this information on to the rest of the passengers. At 9:39 a.m., pilot hijacker Ziad Jarrah would once again relay a message over the intercom that air traffic controllers would overhear.
Captain, I would like to remain seated. There's all aboard and are going to back to the airport and our demand, so please remain quiet.
At this point, it is very likely the 4 hijackers have learned about the attacks on the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan due to the warning Captain Dahl and First Officer Homer received shortly before United Flight 93 was hijacked. At 9:41 a.m., Ziad Jarrah shut off most mechanisms that would allow United Flight 93 to be tracked. Jarrah and his 3 lieutenants, armed with knives and a makeshift bomb, are fastly approaching Washington, D.C. At this time, all 4,500 aircrafts flying over American airspace are ordered to land immediately. The United States Air Force still has not received any orders to scramble fighter jets to intercept or shoot down Flight 93. With decision makers paralyzed on the ground, the passengers on board Flight 93 are the last line of defense for America. At 9:44 a.m., passenger Todd Beamer, using the airphone in row 32, reaches a GTE operator, Lisa Jefferson. His connection will last for the remainder of the flight. He reports the flight has been hijacked and both the captain and first officer are lying on the floor of the first class cabin and are severely injured or dead. He reports that one of the hijackers has a red belt with a bomb strapped to his waist, and 2 of the hijackers, who had knives, entered the cockpit and shut the door. He indicates that the plane is flying erratically, going up and down, and has turned or changed direction. Beamer tells Jefferson that he and some other passengers are planning something and sets the phone down. From 9:46 to 9:50 a.m., the passengers and crew on Flight 93 have become aware of the events that have happened in New York City and Washington, D.C. Passenger Linda Gronlund dials her sister from the airphone in row 26 and leaves a message saying her flight has been hijacked by terrorists who claim to have a bomb. She mentions to her sister that a couple of planes have been flown into the World Trade Center already and suspects her flight was going to meet the same fate. Flight attendant Cece Lyles calls her husband from the airphone in row 32 and leaves a recorded message saying that the aircraft has been hijacked. Lyles mentions that 2 planes have hit the World Trade Center and hopes to see her husband's face again. Passenger Marion Britton calls her friend from the phone in row 33 and tells him that her plane has been hijacked. Britton also says that the hijackers cut the throats of 2 passengers and reveals that she knows that 2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center. Flight attendant Sandy Bradshaw calls her husband from the airphone in row 33. In the 8-minute call, Bradshaw tells her husband that the plane has been hijacked by 3 men who carried knives and put on red bandanas as they hijacked the plane. She believes the plane may be over the Mississippi River because they are passing over a large river. She tells him that the passengers are discussing how to overpower the hijackers, and she is heating water to throw on the hijackers. At 9:53 a.m., passenger Elizabeth Wayno calls her stepmother, and their call only lasts 4.5 minutes. Her final words are, "I have to go. They're breaking into the cockpit. I love you." Flight attendant Sandy Bradshaw also concludes her phone call with her husband and tells him everyone is running to first class. I have to go. Passenger Todd Beamer tells GTE phone operator Lisa Jefferson that he and a few passengers are getting together to jump the terrorists with the bomb. Beamer has 2 requests for Lisa Jefferson. The first one, to recite the Lord's Prayer and Psalm 23 with him, which other passengers join in. His second request is for Jefferson to tell his family how much he loves them if he doesn't make it. After his final request, Lisa Jefferson hears muffled voices and Beamer answers, "Are you ready? Let's roll." These are Todd Beamer's final words to Jefferson and a battle cry for the events to come. At 9:57 a.m., the battle for United Flight 93 begins. The cockpit recorder of Flight 93 has not yet been made public, but the transcripts have been released to the general public. Armed with plastic silverware, boiling water, and other makeshift weapons, the passengers launch a furious counter-assault against the hijackers. Ahmed al-Haznawi, the muscle hijacker who murdered passenger Mickey Rottenberg when the hijacking began, is most likely overpowered or killed by the passengers. The passengers realize the bomb al-Haznawi has strapped to his waist is a fake. At 9:58 a.m., the charade is over. Pilot hijacker Ziad Jarrah becomes aware of the passenger revolt and tells fellow hijacker Saeed Al-Ghamdi to block the cockpit door and begins rolling the plane sharply left to right. At 9:59 a.m., the cockpit recorder captures the sounds of thumps, shattering glass, and plates outside the cockpit door. Ahmed al-Anami, the last muscle hijacker between the cockpit and the passengers of Flight 93, is most likely overpowered and killed by the passengers outside the cockpit door. At 10 a.m., to suppress the passenger revolt, Ziad Jarrah changes tactics and pitches the nose of the aircraft up and down. At this time, with 2 muscle hijackers incapacitated or dead, hijacker Ziad Jarrah asks Saeed Al-Ghamdi, "Is that it? Shall we finish it off?" "No, when they all come, we finish it off," replies Al-Ghamdi. The passenger revolt on Flight 93 is witnessed by the outside world at this time when Bill Wright, the pilot of a small private aircraft flying over Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, sees Flight 93 with its landing gear down and the aircraft rocking heavily and appears to be in distress. Back on Flight 93, the passengers use a drink cart as a battering ram to break the cockpit door down. "In the cockpit, or else we'll die," shouts a male passenger. At 10:01 a.m., Ziad Jarrah once again asks Saeed Al-Ghamdi, "Is that it? Shall we put it down?" Al-Ghamdi replies, "Yes, pull it down." At 10:02 a.m., the revolt intensifies. The cockpit for Flight 93 is most likely breached by the passengers, and a struggle for control of the airplane's yoke is most likely occurring. Flight 93, nose down, begins a rapid descent. The aircraft is turned hard to the right. The final phrase uttered from the cockpit of Flight 93 is Allahu Akbar, Arabic for God is great. At this time, Nevin Lambert, a resident of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, sees a large Boeing aircraft flying with its wings vertical a few hundred feet above his home. In its final moments, Lambert sees Flight 93 turned upside down and plummet into the ground. At 10:03 a.m., United Flight 93 crashes upside down in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 563 miles per hour, about 20 minutes away flying time from Washington, D.C. All 44 passengers on board are dead. The intended target for Al-Qaeda was the U.S. Capitol building, which was confirmed in the following years by Al-Qaeda's senior leadership. At the same time, many residents of Shanksville, Pennsylvania, feel and hear the impact of the crash. Immediately, many citizens within a 3-mile radius call 911 to report a large airplane crash, and many see a large cloud of black smoke in the clear blue sky. At 10:06 a.m., Val McClatchy, from her home a mile and a half away from Flight 93's crash site, hears the sound of a plane crash and sees a cloud of black smoke rising in the clear blue sky. From her front porch, she takes a photograph of the black cloud of smoke. This is the only picture known from the immediate crash of United Flight 93. McClatchy provides her memory card from her camera to the FBI. At 10:10 a.m., firefighters arrive at the crash site of United Airlines Flight 93. They find no survivors. At 10:37 a.m., media news outlet CNN is the first news station to confirm that a Boeing 747 is down in Pennsylvania. Many of the family members of the passengers on board Flight 93 learn the fate of their loved ones with this news report and the others that follow. In the following weeks, local and federal agents work around the clock to identify the remains of Flight 93. By late December 2001, 3 months after Flight 93 crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, all the people on board's remains were identified using dental records, fingerprints, or DNA analysis. Some of the notable remains found at Flight 93's crash site were a red bandana worn by one of the Al-Qaeda hijackers, Ziad Jarrah's charred passport, and other personal items, many that are on display at the 9/11 Museum and the Flight 93 National Memorial. Fast forward to 2015, after 14 years of planning and development, the Flight 93 National Memorial was completed and opened to family members of the victims on September 10, 2015. The Flight 93 National Memorial currently is open for the general public to visit near the crash site of United Airlines Flight 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The story of United Flight 93 is not just one of tragedy, it's one of defiance, courage, and sacrifice. On a day when we faced fear, we also found courage. The passengers and crew of United Airlines Flight 93 delivered the first knockout blow in the war on terrorism. They gave their lives not in fear, but in the hope of saving others. Because of their bravery, a likely attack on the U.S. Capitol was stopped not by the military or government, but by ordinary people who answered the call to heroism that morning. The story of United Flight 93 reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is light, the light of human resilience, courage, and unity. Thank you for watching this episode of The Legacy Times. If you found this video meaningful, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others. This channel is dedicated to preserving the stories that shape our world, not just the ones that are widely known, but the ones that deserve to be remembered. Stay informed, stay curious, be kind, and I'll see you next time.